All right, we are back here at Post Wrestling, another quarter in the books and on the books for WWE, and that means the return of this man, the guy that runs the place at Wrestlenomics. Brandon Thurston is back. It's a big weekend for one Mr. Thurston. Brandon, always great to chat with you. Welcome back to Post Wrestling.
It's great to be here to talk with our. Some people say that the biggest events every quarter are AEW pay-per-views, but I think they're not competition, and I think the Wrestlenomics visits that we have here with Post Wrestling are the biggest events of the quarter.
Yes, somebody online dubbed these "rewind a quarter," which sure, we will get on top of those. So it's certainly a very interesting time for WWE, and coming out with this earnings report. I guess what would be your headline, Brandon, coming out of Thursday's announcement? Certainly, this is one where they're coming off just returning to live events with fans, so they did have a lot to showcase to the analysts of the early returns that we saw over the last 2 weekends.
Yeah, there was a lot of bragging about really things that happened after the end of the quarter. So the Q2 is April 1st to June 30th, but all of the return to live events started happening in the middle of July. So there was a lot of talk about viewership, how much better ratings are now that they have their live fans back. And Nick Khan went through just one by one every live event that they've done, comparing the merchandise sales of that live event to the one before, and it's the highest grossing in that city compared to the one before. Not letting us know whether or not he's comparing Raws or pay-per-views to house shows or what, but they're trying to put over that they're doing really strong business with the return to live fans. I'm tempted to talk about profitability and be boring for a second. That the average analyst expected an EPS of something like 23 cents per share and ended up being 34 cents per share. So they beat earnings. They were about 36% more profitable than the average stock analyst expected them to be. There was even data that Nick Khan shared, not absolute data points, but differences year over year in terms of the viewership of pay-per-views on Peacock.
Right.
Apparently, people are watching pay-per-views at a higher frequency on Peacock, and I think the thing that everybody wants to talk about, if you want a tweet to do numbers, just mention AEW and WWE in the same tweet, and there was some of that here as well.
Well, we have a wide variety of tweets that we could send out. The fact that revenue for this quarter was up, and their profit for the quarter was, their net income was down from last year, but it's a very difficult comparison to the second quarter of last year that you can go into, Brandon, is that this is when they're running the empty shows at the Performance Center, and there was just such a great savings during that quarter that was sort of the silver lining of the pandemic for the company until they had to make the migration to the Thunderdome.
Yeah. So if we look at Q2, this is Q2, they made $29.2 million in net income, which is down substantially from $43.8 million in Q2 2020. And like you said, I think that's largely just due to the media expenses that they saved by just running Raw and SmackDown in a fixed location of the Performance Center. But if you compare this Q2 to the Q2 of 2019, the last time there wasn't a pandemic in Q2, they made 10.4 versus this Q 29.2. So it's like they're more than double, almost 3 times as profitable this quarter versus the same quarter of 2 years ago. Last time they weren't having huge expenses because of running at the PC.
Obviously, a lot of the focus was, as you mentioned, just on the recent return to live events, and it was very notable, just the fact, and I don't expect any differently, but it's when television ratings have been one of the central themes of a lot of these calls. It was, television ratings are just one thing that measures our success. But this time around, I mean, they had a lot to trumpet about the recent uptick for Raw and SmackDown. And this was, I would say, if you were an analyst coming away from this call, they certainly painted quite a nicer picture of their television performances.
Yeah, and ratings have been up in these. We're talking on Friday. There's going to be a SmackDown tonight. We'll get an overnight number tomorrow. But so if we compare how SmackDown and Raw have done compared to last year in July, they're up in total viewership by one of my my comparisons in my spreadsheet. SmackDown is up 13% at the moment, and Raw is up 4% in total viewership. Compare that to 2 years ago when say Raw was still on USA Network, and SmackDown was on USA Network too, but Raw is down like 25% from where it was 2 years ago in the pre-pandemic year of 2019. But viewership is up. SmackDown did 2.3 million the first week, 2.1 million the second week. I've got to think it's going to be down a little bit more. SmackDown hasn't faced they faced the opening ceremony of the Olympics. They haven't faced actual competition of the Olympics yet, which has been a little bit more highly viewed. I don't know what it'll be on a Friday though. But Raw did better than I thought it would on the second week. In excess of 1.8 million viewers. I was predicting a little bit lower, maybe 1.75. So they're holding up. I'm still skeptical that viewership is really going to sustain for anything more than a few weeks here, and I still think it's going to be back to a sort of normal level by the middle of August. But they want to paint a picture, and I've been saying this for a couple of weeks. They'll have good enough numbers going into that earnings call to be able to say things are great, your ratings are good, and ratings are okay. And I think really the main story. I almost wonder if they should include in some of these numbers that they put out sort of their rank among the other programs, because that's where the trends are really stable.
Right.
And I think that's a really significant factor into how much is WWE going to be able to maintain or improve its media values, especially in the US. Their ranking is still strong, at least in 18 to 49. In the rankings that now we see at Spoiler TV, that we used to see through Showbiz Daily. On Monday on cable, Raw is often still number one. Maybe there's an NBA game, NBA playoff game or something that's in there that beats it sometimes. But usually Raw is number one. SmackDown is usually neck and neck with Shark Tank on ABC on Friday. And that you can say a lot about how much ratings have declined and how much WWE popularity in general, I believe, has declined. There's lots of evidence for that. But the ranking of WWE programming compared to the general slew of programming in the US, it still ranks very highly. And I think as long as it does rank that highly, it's going to continue to get pretty strong media values.
This might be just a question that, we're very deep in the bubble, obviously, but when it comes to something like a Showbuzz Daily, that a lot of people followed that, and you point out like the rankings and such, like I don't think Spoiler TV has necessarily taken that mantle yet. Is there any kind of negative with like that loss of just from a perception standpoint to someone that is following WWE or AEW business and that was a go-to for them? Or is that kind of, you're talking about a very, very niche audience that was seeking out data in that kind of forum?
Yeah, I would like to think it's a huge population of people, but I'm not the world's most popular writer just yet. I think there are some people who relied on Showbiz Daily, but I don't think it's a huge number of people. I think like if you're going to say like stock analysts who do have a lot of influence on at least W stock price, I think if they need it, they probably can get access to data like that some other way, if not through some connection in media. I don't know if they would get a Nielsen subscription. That's one of the weird. I had a phone call with somebody from Nielsen like a month or two ago just to see like what would it cost, and do they even sell Nielsen subscriptions to people in the media? And the guy wanted to charge me like $10,000 for a weekly update of certain data, which was going to be way.
Oh, trust me, trying to get numbers up here in Canada. You'd think I'm asking for like a meeting with the Pope to have access to this as a media member. It's these are very protected numbers, and I always look at it that if nothing else, Brandon, you have proven the effectiveness of charts, and I think just having that Tuesday pattern that people go to a site and they see a chart very nicely color coded, and Raw is occupying those top 3 slots or 3 of the top 10. That's, that connects with a lot of people just in a subtle perception value, I think.
Yeah. And WWE's publishing these numbers too, if nothing else, quarterly. They're not publishing every week, but they do put in their key performance indicators, my favorite W documents that you can find at corporate.w.com. They do publish the total viewership for Raw and SmackDown. They don't talk about NXT, interestingly, but they do Raw and SmackDown and have for years.
Was NXT mentioned once on this call?
I don't think so.
I don't think it came up once in
so.
the call at all. And to my knowledge, Paul Levesque was not on this call. I never assume he's on the call, but there's been the odd time that Vince just, Paul will answer that question. And all of a sudden Paul's like in the background and he leans in, but he was not identified as even being on this call.
I think there's a lot more people in the room than we hear talk.
Probably.
Because for the last few, since the Nick Khan era, we've had 4 people who have been advertised to appear on this thing. And it's Vince, it's Nick Khan, Stephanie McMahon, and the CFO, Christina Salen. And before that, it was just Vince, Frank Riddick, the interim CFO. But before that, I guess it was Vince, George Barrios, and Michelle Wilson. And sometimes Stephanie would chime in. And sometimes, like you said, he would say, Paul, handle that. And all of a sudden, Paul would talk. But I imagine there's quite a few people, including media relations and investor relations, who are in the room. Michael White's too of investor relations is obviously there, who does the intro every quarter. But no mention of NXT. And it's not something that stock analysts deeply care about. You know, I always say when I first started listening to these things, I wanted to know why these people on the Q&A were not asking tougher questions and grilling them. They're just trying to ask questions that help them figure out what the future of this business is and how to make their financial estimates. But it leaves one to wonder, what does Vince at least think of the place of NXT at this point? Now that, you know, I've heard people speculate that, you know, maybe Vince just views Paul Levesque and NXT as sort of a failure. It wasn't able to beat AEW in the ratings. And, you know, you see things like Karrion Kross losing in 2 minutes to Jeff Hardy with the title around his waist. Who knows what he thinks of it? And it wasn't a show worth bringing up, apparently. They've renewed their TV deal. The first term, the 2-year term, will expire in September, probably the end of September, and they'll go to another term. There's no indication that they've received any sort of raise in the amount of money that they're getting from NBC Universal for being on USA. And I'm still very skeptical that it's worth that much money anyway. I think if I were to guess, I'm fairly confident that it's worth substantially less than what AEW is getting. And to put that in some context, AEW is getting $44 million per year on an average annual basis. And I think it's probably substantially less than that, and maybe not even a lot of guaranteed money. So, but like the stock price doesn't move when that announcement is made, so it can't be a big deal.
Well, it was interesting to hear Nick Khan outline kind of their biggest areas for growth. They mentioned the licensing of the WWE network internationally, so looking to mirror what they've done with Peacock in the US, sales and sponsorship, and then scripted and unscripted television. And you look at, you know, one of the big terms that was getting thrown out a lot over the last few years was global localization. And now that you're on the back end of a pandemic, like I would be very curious about what the new philosophy is when it comes to, like, I think this is a company that very much wants to make content, sell content in all these different parts of the world. But the idea of different performance centers popping up at a time when we've seen cuts to NXT, we've seen Canyon Ceman let go. Like, what is their development process today, as opposed to maybe even a year ago where it was? Outside of that one reference we've heard from Nick Khan about going to Mexico, like, you haven't heard too much about that idea of planting our flag in different parts of the world and kind of building that foundation.
Yeah. So global localization is literally a presentation that Paul Levesque gave. And I think it was the Business Partner Summit of 2018. I
think it was 18.
Yeah, where he stood up on the stage before all the business partners on WrestleMania weekend. And we looked at the big yellow map behind him, and there were NXT logos all over it on different continents. And it looks like, well, maybe they were going to do India. And they did that special, the Superstar Spectacular, for the India market. But there certainly hasn't been an NXT India that's popped up yet. I have to think that a lot of the strategy about what they seriously want to do, it has changed with maybe not just Nick Khan. I know everybody likes to say, well, it's Nick Khan doing this and that, but
it's a whole new team that's essentially like the Barrios Wilson team has been, you know, Nick Khan is kind of the face of it, but it's a new team and new ideas inherently are going to come with that.
Yeah. I think there's a lot that happens downstream because this and that have changed and leadership has changed. But yeah, I wonder if You look at the Performance Center, and I think there's, if it's up to me to have the discussion, I think, is the Performance Center a success? What are we really spending on the Performance Center? It's not clear from their filings what they're spending on the Performance Center, but it's a lot between maintaining the facility and maintaining all the coaches and keeping all that talent under contract. It's a really expensive venture, and I don't know that it's the most efficient way to produce talent. You look at what a lot of talent have done since they've left the Performance Center system, and they've gone on to greater success in other places, including AEW. So I don't know that do you want to open up another Performance Center in addition to the one you've got in the UK? It's going to be a lot more expense. And, is it going to have the output for you that you felt like it was going to give you in 2018 when things felt better, when the NXT brand was hotter, and when AEW didn't exist? I think that's a big question, and it does look like, the Paul Levesque version of developmental is not held in as high regard as it once was.
Yeah, and I would also look at just the idea of, developmental is the idea that, this is, some of our most success has come from talent that we sign once they're well into their career. Why are we footing the bill for years 1 through 5 when they can be out there? The industry is going to weed itself out of those that can thrive, and then we sign them and we bring them in when they are ready to be put on the main roster, put on television, instead of, year after year of working out at the Performance Center. It's just interesting that we'll probably see in the next year or two, like, what is the next step of that entire process of their business. Looking just at the call itself, Nick Khan usually is front and center for all of this. What were some of your major takeaways? Any surprises that came out of his statements?
We're going to get John Cena NFTs in conjunction with SummerSlam.
Go right next to my Undertaker one, which I don't even know if that's physically possible to put something next to an NFT. I still cannot break down an NFT for you, but I get the sense that NFTs have cooled off a bit, but they're going all in on these.
Yeah, I think NFT. I've heard people say, well, the NBA Top Shots, which is really what started this NFT craze, at least in sports memorabilia. Maybe those serve as an educational tool, and maybe NFTs in some form or another, whether it's through collectibles or not, is going to sort of educate consumers into knowing what an NFT is. I don't see these as something that's going to generate major revenue. I mean, the Undertaker NFTs sold out pretty quickly, but it's not like they sold a ton of volume. It's an interesting experiment, and I know they have some investors who are like, this is the cool thing to do right now, and you need to see if there's, we know how passionate your WWE fans are. They would probably love this. So they should at least be experimenting in it. It's probably something that they contract out, and it's probably not a lot of risk for them to take on if it doesn't work out well. So might as well. I feel like there's a joke somewhere about you can't see me somewhere in that.
Oh, but, they can certainly drill that one home. They're also going to be revisiting the whole construction of their new headquarters, and that looks to be like the major spending for the rest of the year. So it looks like Casa de McMahon is going to be expanding greatly this year.
Yeah, that's something that's been put on hold because of the pandemic. They're just moving down the street in Stamford. We got some confirmation that they are going to sell the 3 facilities that they currently use. I knew that they had 2. I don't know that I knew that they had 3, but they have their main headquarters. They have a media facility and some sort of digital media facility. But anyway, Christina Salen said that they do expect to sell those buildings. So if you want to buy Titan Tower and turn it into a wrestling Hall of Fame, in tribute of Ole Anderson and people like that, you can do that in the years to come.
How I did not speak with you about this, but of course, this caught a lot of people off guard on Monday, the beginning of the week, with the announcement of the United States of America versus Vince McMahon coming to a TV network to be determined near you. Do you think we get this series, Brandon? Is this going to make it to a distributor? Are we going to see this series at the end of the day?
I think it'll come out sometime after the Pandemonium movie comes out, starring Bradley Cooper. That was announced, I think, in 2017. Maybe that's still being shopped around. Maybe sometime after the Netflix, maybe the next Netflix announcement about the documentary, the multi-part documentary on Vince McMahon. That is recently enough that maybe that's still going to come out. I think it's interesting. You think about is it just a coincidence that the pandemonium thing happened? And the what about Stephanie's memoir? Remember Stephanie's memoir that was completed in like 2016? Lady Balls. They had to rename it. I don't know why. They weren't happy with that name apparently for some reason.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Somewhere on a bookshelf lies Stephanie McMahon and Paul Heyman's books. They are just lying there without anyone to have read these.
Yeah, I don't want to get be too much of a conspiracy theorist, but I mean, Vince is a control freak. I wonder if there's like certain stuff that he either doesn't want told, or he wants certain control over the telling of certain stories that they don't pass through the Vince filter and they just get shelved.
Yeah, it was one that certainly caught me off guard, and just that if. Like, obviously, this is through a WWE lens. I mean, they have an executive producer credit on it. But to me, it's like that story is like very much the roots of it go to the whole Ring Boy scandal. It's like, I don't know why you would want to even touch anything that connects the dots. But I think it's also, I think they look at Vince McMahon is the most compelling figure we have. And this is when we are selling ideas and series. That's the name that WWE has. That is the most. Like, how many book projects are out there? The Netflix series, you add this to the mix. Vince McMahon is your common thread between all of these projects that I think you look at this company getting everything they can out of the lore of Vince McMahon.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of interesting stories to tell. At least I feel that way as a viewer. But this is definitely one of the stories, the steroid trial and Phil Mushnick being out to get him. This is one of the stories that he feels is an important story in his life. And we got a reminder of that too. There are certain stories in Vince McMahon's life that he still apparently draws back on. He brought up the name Ted Turner yesterday, which I was like, yep, that's Vince is still Vince, I guess. But there are definitely these things that he's fixated on. And I mean, being indicted and being put on trial is definitely a big deal. But I thought it was interesting too that Rupert Murdoch is named in there as sort of he's positioned in that press release sort of as a villain, as the person who owns the New York Post. This is the newspaper that the columnist Phil Mushnick was writing for. He was writing all these columns that were very critical of Vince that maybe led to the investigations from the Justice Department. It's an interesting coincidence that you would name Rupert Murdoch, who still owns the Fox Corporation today, which is one of your business partners. It's the network that airs SmackDown. I think the rumors that I've seen about WWE and Fox maybe not getting along, I think they're probably maybe a little bit exaggerated. I do think though that there's some discomfort about promoting Peacock on Fox. I think there is some discomfort there, and there would be more comfort if SmackDown was doing 2.5 million viewers or 3 million viewers, but it's not. It's doing 2 million or 2.1. We'll see what it does tonight. So I thought that was a remarkable coincidence. And David Bixenspan went through the history and found that, well, actually, Rupert Murdoch didn't quite even own it at that time. So it's I don't know, how does that make its way into the press release? That's interesting.
Yeah, as I said, it's always a great sign when David Bixenspan can write a whole piece fact-checking a press release. We're not even at the treatment for this show yet, right. And you can already fact-check a couple of paragraphs that his
school-age children. His children were in school at the time. They were 18 and 24, and poor Vince. He's just. I have so much sympathy for Vince. Everybody's out to get him, especially in that period.
Well, we will look forward to that. The martyr, Vince McMahon, fighting for free speech against the oppressive media. The other note is that it looks like Q4, we will get the return of the trademarked large-scale live event, large-scale international event, Brandon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I saw Andrew Zarian from the Madman podcast say that and you've said that it's October 21st is what you've heard?
That was the date Andrew Zarian reported, and then I heard that was accurate. So that's the date I'm under the impression it's earmarked for.
Yeah. So they didn't explicitly confirm that they're going to do a large scale international event for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. But one stock analyst did ask Christina Salen to confirm that in their financial projection that they are providing, that a large scale international event was assumed in the guidance, and she explicitly said that it was. They do. So in other words, they do expect to run a Saudi event before the end of the year. And if they didn't expect to, their guidance wouldn't be what it was. It would be a different range of numbers than the ones that they give. So yeah, they're going to go back to Saudi Arabia and get in excess of $50 million to go there. If the Delta variant doesn't prevent them, we'll see. I don't know, like, what are the restrictions going to be? I know they're going to go to the UK in a few weeks here. I think it's September. I need to look into more. What are the requirements and restrictions? Do people have to be vaccinated? Who can go and can't? When there's already issues about who can go and can't, and who can perform and who can't on the Saudi shows.
Yeah, that's, it opens up so many questions. And if you go through that 10Q, like, it seems like there are constant reminders of, just it's very much on their radar of, like, the potential problems that they could have in the remainder. It's not as though this is all behind us and there couldn't be another shutdown again. I think they're very much operating with that potential. Yeah,
they declined to give updated, more specific guidance, which it's been so long now. I think they would give more specific guidance as far as what they expect for their favorite profit metric, adjusted OIBDA. But they're being cautious in saying we're not going to give updated guidance because of just out of caution related to COVID-19 and its variants. They did explicitly say in that earnings release, and its variants or something like that about COVID.
So going back to Saudi Arabia, and this has been stated before by WWE that, any events missed just get tacked on to the end of the deal. It's a 10-year deal. And, I'm certain an accountant could maybe break this all down, but I would be very curious that, I could very well see at the end of year 8, year 9, they want to extend this deal. And when will this shortfall of 2 events, when will that money be realized? If it's just constantly put off, do they maybe try and push through and do 3 events next year and 3 the following year just to bring everything up so that you don't have this shortfall of approximately $100 million as opposed to a deal being extended? And that's always kind of this carrot at the end of the deal that you never get to.
Yeah. Vince did use language like it would be put on at the end of the deal, which gave me the impression that the 10-year deal would just become, how many events have they missed now? They did one in October 2019. So they would have missed one in the middle.
They did one in early 2020. They got in there. Got one in,
right? Yeah. February 27th, 2021 is the last time they were there. So they missed one at the end of 2020, the beginning of this year, and then maybe they'll do the one at the end of this year. So they've missed 2. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it'll be. I was even thinking, when it looked like maybe we would be returning to live events and vaccines were getting distributed here in the U.S. a lot, pretty widely, that maybe we were closer to the return of live events than we were. That maybe they would try to get 2 in. Why not? Why not just do a 2-day crown jewel?
Crown jewels.
See that happening?
Just pluralize it.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's not out of the question, right? Especially when there's sort of a precedent that, we can do a 2-day WrestleMania. Why can't we do a 2-day Saudi event?
It would almost make sense of doing, like, if you could do that, do a 2-day event, you eliminate that problem of trying to get back for Friday for SmackDown, it's SmackDown from Saudi Arabia.
And like anything, when you run 2 events in the same location, you're saving a lot of money that way too.
Sure.
Which is a saving, which would make, if that happened, highly speculative here, but if that happened, that would make those Saudi events even more lucrative because you don't have the huge expense of setting up and tearing down. It's sort of some of that expense is cut in half.
WWE is going to do just fine. I think they're going to make it through. Everyone can relax. As we kind of just transition off of this, I would be remiss not to get some of your reaction to today's AEW pre-sale at the United Center. Over 10,000 tickets sold. Based off of 4 words from Darby Allin on Wednesday night. This was definitely above my expectation of what the presale would do. And the general on sale is Monday. And it looks like this is going to be an enormous success. And I would say Wednesday night, the possibility was there for this, but to actually see this response to the presale, I think that's a hell of a statement of this audience and their belief, their trust in this company that they're going to get what's being dangled in front of them, even though it has not been stated outright.
Right. And this is going to be August 20th, right?
August 20th, yes. So week 2 of Rampage.
United Center. And it looks like, if I look back at the what WrestleTix has put out, they're at over 10,000. That maybe the capacity will be maybe around. I think I saw 13,000. In any event, it's going to be not quite as big in all likelihood as what they're going to have in Arthur Ashe, where they're nearly at 17,000 tickets out for Arthur Ashe on September 22nd. But I've got to think that CM Punk is going to be there. In fact, if he's not there, there's going to be serious problems on that night.
If ever they don't have pen to paper on this guy, my God, does he have you over a barrel? Like, I would think this has to be completely locked in by the time they did this announcement.
I think when you see Tony Khan responding to questions publicly about, are you negotiating, or are CM Punk and Bryan Danielson on their way to AEW, and he says, yeah, he can't talk about it, or he has no comment, when he could just as easily downplay it or say, we have no deals in place with them. Mm-hmm. He's definitely not confirming it, but I don't see why you wouldn't downplay it or deny it if it wasn't really happening. So I'm pretty confident that both those guys are on their way. And if there weren't actually deals in place, or the sense from both parties that a deal was going to be completed, then I think there would be some denial either from AEW or from Punk or Bryan themselves. So I think that's going to happen. And I think it's going to be, obviously it's going to do immediate big business at the United Center in terms of a live event. It goes a long way too. That's going to be a Rampage. It goes a long way. That'll be the second Rampage. After the first Rampage, it will probably be a heavily hyped Rampage. The first edition of any TV show is going to, remember WWE Main Event with the debut on the W Network or wherever it was with John Cena. It felt like maybe it would be another big show, but now the Main Event is Main Event. But anyway, so I think Rampage on episode 1 will be a big deal. And then you got the second one that's looking like it's going to have CM Punk on it. It's going to go a long way toward what AEW, I think, wants to do, is to not just have a Raw to sell, but to have a SmackDown to sell as well. And I think there's a big lesson from what WWE did. There's a ton of things to criticize WWE for over these last 5 years or so. But one of the smartest things they did from a business standpoint is that they did the brand split, or they found some way to make SmackDown really valuable. Wherein, let's say 2015, I think SmackDown just sort of felt like a B show that you didn't really need to see. And then they split the rosters and eventually even made SmackDown live on Tuesday, which maybe is not even as big of a deal. But they made SmackDown a more important show to watch again, and it helped its viewership. And they moved its time slots around. They moved it from Thursday night to Tuesday night, and they moved it from Sci-Fi to USA, and now they moved it to Fox. But the reason why they were able to sell it to Fox at a better rate than it would have been otherwise is because they made that show more valuable by splitting the roster. Which sounds like I'm making an argument for why AEW should split the roster. But I'm not. My point is that they had a really strong show and a marginally weaker show in SmackDown that they elevated to almost be equal. And I think it really benefited them in their ability to negotiate favorable media rights values. SmackDown is worth a lot more, I think. It's worth $205 million rather than some number less than that if they hadn't pushed really hard to improve the viewership of that show and make it more, to make people feel like they had to watch it more. And that's what AEW needs to do to not just sell a highly ranked show like Dynamite, but they are trying to develop a second show that will be Rampage. That will, it's the difference between maybe it's the difference between having, media rights values that are X versus having media rights values that are, 1.3X or 1.5X. So that's what I think they're doing there. And if you can get some really good momentum with Rampage and have people have these memories of the first Rampage was a big deal, the second Rampage had CM Punk on it. My God, it's a good ramp to keep this into becoming a big deal show and not just becoming another hour of TV that I don't need to watch. So yeah.
I think it's also going to be very telling just to see, like, we know this is going to be a very big deal for AEW, but it's also, I think, just cutting beyond the wrestling audience of how much attention this brings to them. You have, I mean, Raw is in Chicago on Monday. They're going to have a full all-state arena that I can't imagine that this is not going to spark a huge, like this is a Chicago crowd that has not been to a big WWE show in at least a year and a half, probably since the Christmas tour of 2019, that I think the Punk chants are back on Monday. And then this theoretical debut at Rampage is happening on the eve of SummerSlam. Like I can't imagine that there is not an element of this that is designed to take some of the wind out of the WWE sales to prop them up. And this is going into September where they're going to have a lot of attention in the Northeast with the Newark show, with Arthur Ashe Stadium, that they are going to be getting a lot of media attention that they have not received before.
Yeah. Chicago, I didn't even put that together. I knew there was a Raw in Chicago, but it is this coming Monday, where there are about 12,000 tickets out. I'm sure Kevin Dunn and his team will be working hard that night to obfuscate any unintended crowd reactions. But I think Punk and Bryan, like I said, I'm pretty confident that they're on their way to AEW, and I think it's gonna go a long way toward inspiring some confidence in the wrestling fan. I don't know how many of them there are who are, let's say, wrestling fans who are not totally all in, no pun intended, on AEW, but might be willing to engage with it more. If you
at least stop in and see, like, if you are aware of AEW but you're not watching it, like these are the kinds of things that you're going to stop and at least check in and see what's going on with this company. Yeah,
I think it goes a long way to building some credibility for them, and I think it's going to help their viewership at a time in September. Let's say it's CM Punk in Chicago. Let's say maybe it's Daniel Bryan by the time they get to Arthur Ashe, and in September, at a time when Raw is going to be going against Monday Night Football, which is going to take some degree of a bite out of their viewership, maybe 10%. And we're getting closer and closer in certain younger demographics. Like I always say, WWE has this massive P50 plus audience that watches them, that will fortify the comparison between Raw and Dynamite. It'll be hard for Dynamite to overcome Raw. The lowest viewership ever for Raw is 1.47 million viewers. That's a couple 100,000 below the highest number that Dynamite has done. I think, except for that first episode, they might have done 1.4. I would have to look it up for the first Dynamite. But just over time, I see AEW continuing to use the trust that it's earned from its fans, from delivering what some believe to be a good product. And WWE, which is, I think, for many years, frustrated a lot of fans who are hungry for an alternative. In some ways, they try to super serve those people, if you will, with NXT and maybe with some other things. But it's, you can only do it so long before I think the sort of inauthenticity of WWE starts to creep in. It's complicated, and it's easy for me to sit back and be like, oh yeah, AEW is going to overtake them in this and that in a short amount of time, in months maybe, but it always turns out to be a little bit more complicated than you would expect. And it's a thing that I wrestle with a lot, is like, what really is the sentiment of the wrestling fan base in general, or who even are those people? What is the volume of those people? We know that in excess of 2 million people watch W programming on any given week, but what are those fans really thinking? How frustrated really are they with WWE? And is this sort of fan that we see defending WWE at every angle on Twitter, for example, how representative of that is the general wrestling fan or WWE fan? That's harder for me to unpack. And partly I've done these Net Promoter Score surveys. I've done 3 of them now. So we can almost start to see trends. I've been doing this every quarter, where we do see, I do this through Facebook. I put out a Facebook ad that is hopefully more random than it would be if I had just, sent out a survey off of my social media. So I'm not sharing it organically, only through a paid ad. And I do see every survey that I've done so far, the 3 times that I've done it, is that people feel more positively about AEW Dynamite than they do about Raw or SmackDown or NXT. The the thing that we're measuring there, Net Promoter Score, is you take people who scored the show very low as far as would they recommend it. Those are the detractors. Then you have some passives in the middle, and then people who like rate it at the maximum rating. They're the promoters, and I think that is an underrated quality in probably any brand, but particularly in wrestling, where it's great to have a product. It's great to promote it. And it's great to have all these great business partners where across our platforms we promote each other, and NBC does this and that for us, and Fox too. But the best kind of promotion that you can have is from actual customers, consumers who tell their friends and their family members that you should check this out. It's actually pretty good.
And zombies.
And zombies. That's right. You have to have zombies in there and help Batista put on the best Netflix movie yet. And just things like that. You're gonna get me sidetracked, John. That you got Stephanie McMahon out there talking about how great this integration was for Armies of the Dead or Army of the Dead for the Netflix movie, where Ryan Satin, of all people, our friend Ryan Satin, didn't even like it. It was universally buried. I don't think this was just a smart mark internet fan who just complains too much. And here she is on this conference call, really celebrating this great moment. Which, if you're a lay investor who's more interested in the gains that you can make in WWE stock than you are in the actual product, sounds good to me. That sounds like really smart integration. Yeah, that sounds great to my business mind. Doesn't get acquainted with WWE programming. But I think that's just that moment there from the Backlash pay-per-view where they have the zombies come out is just sort of this great example of how much WWE puts its business partners and its perception in the media industry above their care for what their fans think and above their care for whether or not their fans are going to promote their product to their friends and thereby growing their audience. But we talk about often.
It's an excellent point, just that disconnect that you bring out, because a lot of the times when we'll see stuff like that, even if it's universally panned, the argument is always, well, this was a gigantic deal for the company. And no one argues that point, but there is a certain fan service you're disregarding. And look no further than Wednesday when they did the Space Jam integration on Dynamite. And that was received very positively. It's like your audience will accept these things if there is a meeting in the middle of how to present this in an organic way that both serves your business interests and your fan interests, which I think sometimes you're seeing, like, you have one company that there is clearly a premium placed on the fan side of things that an audience feels maybe disenfranchised on the other side.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting how Stephanie McMahon's title is literally the chief brand officer, and you could tell a story about how much WWE has improved as a brand. And you can go to that community website that they have about all these charitable activities that they're involved in, which is great. And they've done a lot to improve the perception of their brand over time. They've done a lot, I believe, and I don't have real data about this, but I believe they've done a lot to improve their ad rates over time. It's not what it once was, where you could barely sell advertising for wrestling. It has become, I think TVPG has helped them in that regard.
Definitely. You can just look at the advertisers they have. Like, it's remarkable when you compare.
Yeah. And while they've done this, and while they've been able to explode their media values and they have all these blue chip sponsors, they've improved and took great care of their brand perception with other businesses, with signing deals with leaders who probably don't spend more time than it takes to watch a sizzle reel watching their product. And in the meantime, they've allowed their fan relationship, their fan perception, the perception of their brand from fans to deteriorate. And the big question is just, at what point does that come back to bite them in a serious way? It hasn't so far, because this company is more profitable than it's ever been, and it's probably going to break its profit records again in 2021. I think they're going to, the estimate that I ran, I think they're going to make almost $200 million in net income this year, which will break last year's record for inflation.
Well, all the analysts watching this, they gotta go with your estimates, okay? Because you've been nailing these estimates, and I'm not kidding. Like you are, like seriously, like you were. Did anyone predict this earnings per share closer than you?
Nobody did. I went on a Yahoo Finance.
Brandon's too humble, everyone. So I'm gonna put it out there.
So I've realized what I need to start doing is not looking at what the consensus analyst estimate is. I think I hit it really well. I think this time last year, Q2 last year, when nobody else realized how much money they were saving at the Performance Center. So I had that ahead of stock analysts. Again, who are not like, it's not their job and their life to follow wrestling business. Like maybe it is mine. So they're maybe not as in touch on all this stuff. So I was on for that. And then I ran an estimate the other day and I, got the EPS that I got. And then I looked and I said, oh God, I'm over everybody again. But I was like, all right, I'll learn my lesson from last time, because I adjusted it after looking and thinking, oh, they must know something I don't. But I looked at the historical expectations of what did the stock analysts expect for the last few quarters. And then what did I actually write on Wrestlenomics.com? And it's a mixed bag, but we'll see. Now that I have more confidence in myself going forward, maybe this will be a line chart that will be worthy of publishing and bragging about in a few quarters to come.
Your phone's going to be ringing. It's going to be Curry Baker with a 4-part question for you about how you're breaking all of this down. My last question, because you've been very generous with your time here. You broke down the quarters from Fight for the Fallen on Wednesday, and obviously the biggest thing, both going in and coming out, centered around the main event with Chris Jericho and Nick Gage. Do you view this as a success? And what do you take away from the Nick Gage experiment if you are AEW? Is this a one-off? Is this something you could do again? Do you risk doing it again?
I think Nick Gage is awesome. I've been on shows with him. I'm going to wrestle for the first time tomorrow, but back in the day in 2019, I was on a few shows with him, and he looks like from the outside, if you just see clips of him, like the scariest dude. But then you're around him, and he's just like the greatest locker room leader. But I think it was, for my taste as a wrestling fan, and combine that with some of the reaction that I saw, I thought it was great. Now that said, it was a very violent match that we have this controversy now where Domino's has put this statement out saying that they did not approve of this. And this is not the first violent or bloody match that has been on AEW Dynamite. There's been Britt Baker versus Thunder Rosa. There's been the Blood and Guts War Games match. The difference, which didn't have
much fallout to it. Like there didn't seem to be any kind of unrest. This is the first time, and this was the furthest they've gone.
Well, the difference this time is that there was a pizza cutter being used to scrape somebody's head at the moment that they went picture in picture to Domino's commercial, which kind of created a viral moment. Fans enjoyed it, but it brought a lot of attention to what was happening there. And it sounds like Domino's saying that we might pull our ad. And so I was asking someone who works in the ad industry today, what they thought of this situation. Because I've seen people say, well, even if Domino's pulls out, they'll get replaced real fast by somebody else. And I don't know, maybe they will. It's hard to really say for me without knowing what's going on in the minds of executives at Turner. What do they really think about this? I've been told, early on in AEW's run that Turner gave them some reassurance as far as, being worried about whether things are getting too violent, and that they were reassured that just put on the best possible show that you think you need to put on, and not worry about whether or not Vince is right about being blood and guts. So I guess it's just a question of how much does Turner have a stomach for this if they do get some feedback from advertisers. As far as the viewership goes, the viewership, I think we have an anomaly here, is because I heard from a lot of DirecTV subscribers that there was the feed froze for them in the early part of the show. So we see this massive 20% drop across all these demos. It's just like, what is going on there? And then I got this feedback about people having problems with DirecTV. So there's this, they peak up to 1.2 million viewers. I think it's in Q3. And then it has this massive drop after that. But then every quarter after that is more highly viewed than the next. Peaking, not exactly peaking, but the second most viewed quarter of the show is that main event between Jericho and Nick Gage. So I think it's a success. And I hear people talk about how you should bring in. I think you guys have said it. You should bring Nick Gage in as an occasional attraction. You know, you don't want to have maybe a Nick Gage match every week, but maybe a few times a year or once a year, twice a year, something like that. He's brought in as this mercenary to scare the shit out of somebody. So yeah, I think it's okay, but I don't know. I don't know how to adjust for this. Like, don't run pizza commercials when you've got somebody beating somebody up with a thing that you used to cut pizza with,
or do it on pay-per-view and promote it like he's banned from television. Like, there's ways you can certainly get around this as well. I think they use them again. I think it's just a matter of making it like a once a year thing, or just enough distance in between that they can actually use this to their benefit. But it's also not the thing where I think a lot more advertisers are probably aware of this match just because of this mini controversy. And does it raise the ire of anyone else that kind of AEW was operating, and now they've got some of this attention for the wrong reason?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I think it just comes down to you're weighing, well, this is the content that we want to do. And we feel like we have to make certain creative choices to produce a show that's of this quality, that's going to attract people more so than it would if we didn't do this stuff. Is you have to weigh that against the cost of, or some of our advertisers might not be comfortable with this. So that's something that I guess Turner has to weigh. And we know that AEW loves to please Turner. They love their business partner, so they will do probably just about whatever they tell them to do.
Well, Brandon, it's always great to catch up with you. And this weekend, you are back. If Cage Match is accurate, your first match since March the 7th of last year, as you'll be working Empire State Wrestling at Buffalo Riverworks. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Yeah, so our local promoter, Brett. Call him Brett Mednick. I've been on his case for a number of years. He lives in like this distant exurb, it's a city called Lockport, and which is like a 45-minute drive from Buffalo, New York, and I've been on his case for years about running in Buffalo. You're like known as this Buffalo promotion, but you don't run in Buffalo. Come on. And but Riverworks is where NXT did a house show, and there's been
ROH has run there. Like, yeah, it's a really
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll be running there. It's going to be my first match. That Cage Match is accurate. I think that's probably Excite Wrestling from March 2021. I have been training again since June. I did not step foot in a ring from March 2020 to I think June 1st is when I came back to the school. I did not have that much interest in wrestling during a pandemic with people running around in masks and whatnot. But after I was vaccinated and then waited a couple of months, everybody else has access to the vaccine. I started training again, and it's given me a newfound appreciation for, wrestling is really hard. I got so blown up so badly on the first several times I trained again. So, but my cardio has improved. I've been learning from Bob Backlund. He would do the steps. I've been doing the step test to test my cardio.
The Harvard step test. Yes,
exactly. And it has improved. I'm on a positive trend, actually downward trend, because your pulse rate doesn't have to work as fast. So yeah, I'm wrestling Nick Ando tomorrow for Empire State Wrestling. There's not going to be a live stream. If you are not able to make it there live, it will be, I believe, on IWTV by the end of this next week. So.
Well, look out for that, and do give a plug for the Patreon and everyone's best friend, the viewership spreadsheet.
The viewership spreadsheet. I see John Pollock lurking around in there sometimes.
Oh, dude, this is the almanac of television viewership.
Yes, you can. I do a podcast every week for free, Wrestlenomics Radio. It's on your podcast feed. Just search for Wrestlenomics. We have a website, Wrestlenomics.com, where there's articles for free and data. And then there's the Patreon, patreon.com/Wrestlenomics. Just for $5 a month, you can get access to. I've been doing all these reports. I guess I'm the ratings guy now. I've been doing all these reports.
Showbuzz Brandon.
Yeah. Showbuzz is dead. Long live Showbuzz. I've been doing reports every 4 days a week at least, and then there's Impact too. The ratings are there. That is the original place where I think everybody is getting the ratings from at this point. Sometimes John Oran scoops me. But yeah, there's also, we do occasional emergency podcasts. We just did one last night in reaction to the WWE Q2 earnings report. And I've been doing occasional reports of other kinds too. At the beginning of the month, I'll probably be doing another Google Trends web search report where we look through, what's the web search volume like using Google Trends to look at wrestling promotions and wrestling personalities, where we see things like, Mark Henry and Big Show towering over everyone in AEW and things like that. And I've been doing some YouTube views stuff too, as I learn how to do Python. So yeah, look for that. I think you can follow me at Wrestlenomics and at Brandon Thurston on Twitter.
Go check out all of that tremendous work over at Wrestlenomics. You can also hear Brandon with Chris Gulo dropping audio every Sunday night. Check all of that stuff out. And Brandon, thank you very much. This we probably set a record here. We went into an overrun here. This is probably the longest rewind a quarter that we have done. But people can't get enough of this. These are shows I get some of the most compliments over. So awesome. You always bring the goods. So thank you so much, Brandon. And we look forward to Q3.
Yes, Q3 is always around Halloween, sometimes on Halloween, where we will have the first quarter where they will actually have results to report related to live events and whatever the state of their TV viewership is at that point.
All right. And that's going to wrap us up. We're going to be back in just a couple of hours because we got SmackDown coming up. One of the last Fridays, folks, where it's only 2 hours of programming the pre-Rampage era. Not looking forward to this third hour that we're tacking on to Fridays, but here we are in the content era. So we'll be back with Rewind to SmackDown. And thank you once again to Brandon Thurston for joining us.